back to This Week in Magic Online Finance. I'm your host, Chaz Andres. We're gonna get started as always with the news, but with the lack of any major bombshells in Magic Online Finance, the biggest story of the week is probably that we have a much better sense of what the modern metagame, at least the top tier of that metagame, looks like in the wake of Pro Tour 25th anniversary. So, when I take a look at the metagame, I really see about 6 decks that stand out to me above all the others. There's, of course, Humans, there's Vengevine, there's Ironworks combo, there's Hollow One, there's Blue-White Control, and there's still Tron. So, if you're looking to pick up a modern deck, I would pick up one of those 6. They're at least a little bit above the rest of the metagame. My only risk there would be, I think that Ironworks might be banned in a couple of days, but we'll see. And that, of course, leaves a lot of decks that are a little bit on the wane right now. Formerly great decks, really popular strategies like Burn, Affinity, Giftstorm, Scapeshift, Mardu Pyromancer, even Bant Spirits. These decks just aren't as well positioned now as they were a few weeks or a few months ago. And that doesn't mean the cards are going to be worthless. The metagame can always turn on a dime. And as I said, if you look at the modern metagame of 6 months or 8 months ago, it would have looked entirely different than it does right now. But at the same point, it's worth knowing which way the winds are blowing, especially because I know a lot of you sell some of your modern staples to buy into standard during rotation. So I would say definitely hold on to your cards from the decks on the first list, and if you've got cards from decks on this list, well, those might be the ones to ditch. Let's move on to gaining ground, where in Standard, the biggest gainer of the week was yet again Rekindling Phoenix. It gained another 4 tickets, going from 30 up to 34, and this is a slope that's been going steadily upward since about mid-July, and that makes sense. It's in the best deck in Standard, it's a really good card, Rivals of Ixalan wasn't drafted that heavily, and this is a card that has a shot at being one of the 1 or 2 most expensive in the format after rotation, depending on how things shake out. Now, on the other hand, it's also worth remembering that all the good Rekindling Phoenix decks are definitely going to rotate out of the format. Red is the best color in Standard right now, largely due to a lot of Amonkhet and Kaladesh cards that are going away. So it's awfully presumptuous to say that Rekindling Phoenix will definitely find a home in post-rotation Standard. Granted, it's good enough, and it's found a home so far no matter what. But it's very high variance. I'm not saying it's great, I'm not saying it's terrible, I'm just saying that as likely as it is that this card is going to end up around 50 tickets in October, it's equally likely that it's going to end up around 10. Moving on to Modern, the biggest gainer of the week was Liliana the Last Hope, which gained about 6 tickets this week. It went from 26 up to about 32. And part of the reason for this is simply a correction of the fact that it shouldn't have dropped in the first place, at least not below the 30 ticket mark. It's still quite good in Modern, and this was just sort of one of those seasonal sell-off things that happens every now and then, so you can treat a good portion of this gain as simple market correction. But it's not just a market correction. Liliana the Last Hope is a 2-of sideboard card in the hottest deck in Legacy right now, the Death Shadow deck that did so well at the Pro Tour. And that means there's an entirely new market for this powerful planeswalker, so don't expect these gains to stop around the 30 ticket mark. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the card settles down above 40. Let's move on to our biggest loser, where in Standard it was pretty clearly Nexus of Fate. The card lost 19 tickets this week, dropped from 34 all the way down to 15, so yeah, that 200 times base rate treasure chest drop, it did a lot to stabilize the price of that card. So the question now, of course, is how low is Nexus of Fate actually going to go? Well, if you look at the MTG Goldfish price charts, it looks fairly stable now at that 15 ticket mark, and WotC is also going to be normalizing the drop rate this week, which means that the glut of these entering the marketplace is going to be at least diminished, if not shut down entirely. Of course, there's always a shot that Wizards of the Coast is just going to keep pumping these out and pumping these out in order to show those complainers what for, but I don't think that's particularly likely. What I expect to happen is for the card to sort of kick around that 15 ticket mark before slowly starting to rise or maybe shooting up again at some future time when Nexus of Fate ends up seeing a lot more play. So if you held off buying last week based on my advice when I told you to wait until closer to the 14th or 15th, good for you, now's the time to buy in. Get your set now, so at some point in the future when this card does show up in a top deck again, you will have your copies ready to go. Now this week's sneak is Mishra's Bauble, that pesky little cold snap card that was as high as 33 tickets back when Death's Shadow was running roughshod all over Modern and before it was reprinted in Iconic Masters. It was down to about 7 tickets earlier this summer, it's up to 14 now and still climbing. Now remember, Iconic Masters was just not opened all that much online because the EV was so much lower than it was in paper, so this card still has quite a bit left to gain if people start using it more, and based on its current trajectory, I would not be surprised if it ends up above 20 tickets again soon. Let's move on to Modern, where the biggest loser of the week was actually Karn Liberated. It dropped about 6 tickets, going from 36 down to 30, and this was probably a result of the fact that the card didn't really show up on camera much during day 2 of the Pro Tour. It didn't make the top 4. People are probably a little gun-shy about this, but they really shouldn't be. Based on what I'm seeing in the results and popularity in the metagame, Tron is firmly a tier 1 deck in the current metagame. This was a team Pro Tour. Those results aren't necessarily indicative of performance, and I expect this card to rebound over the coming days or weeks. As always, we're going to end the week by taking a look at the MTGO Trader sales data over the past 7 days, and this gives us a great idea of which cards are selling the best right now, regardless of price increases or decreases. Looking at the overall sales by volume, there's actually a really interesting addition to the top 5 this week. It's Snow-Covered Mountain. What's that one doing there? Well, my guess is it has to do with Skred Dragons, a cool new Modern deck that won a Star City Games Modern Classic a few weeks back. It uses Sarkhan Fireblood, and this is a deck that at least a bunch of people are going to want to try out. Prices haven't moved a bunch yet, but things like Skred, Scrying Sheet, Snow-Covered Mountain, even Stormbreath Dragon could be on the move if this deck catches on. These cards are all pretty cheap right now, so I'm buying. Moving on to overall sales by price, it's the story of standard staples on one hand and Vengevine on the other. The top 3 cards are probably the 3 most interesting post-rotation standard cards. It's Teferi, Karn, and Nexus of Fate, and people are ensuring they have their copies of these for once Guilds of Ravnica comes out. On the other hand, cards 4 and 5 are Leyline of the Void and Surgical Extraction, and those are 2 of the key sideboard cards in the Vengevine deck, and that deck is still really hot right now. I think it's one of the best decks in Modern, so even though those cards plus things like Briggs from Below and Vengevine weren't this week's biggest gainers, I don't expect demand for any of them to drop off anytime soon. That's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Chaz Andres. I will see you next Monday morning for another episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more awesome MTG content just like this. And make sure to tap the bell icon to be notified whenever a video is made live. If you want to keep watching content, here are 2 more videos for you. This video and many others are sponsored by MTGO Traders and Cape Fear Games. Buy and sell digital singles to build your online collection today with MTGO Traders, and get your paper singles, accessories, and much more from Cape Fear Games. Whatever your Magic needs, both places have you covered.